Free agency is here in the NFL, and the Jets are already off to a good start. They re-signed their top free agent to be, but there's still more work to do. We'll break down Jets free agency today on Locked On Jets.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome. This is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Monday, March 10th, 2025, and I'm your host, John B. from GanggreenNation.com. Thank you so much for making the show your first listener, first watch every day. A big shout out to you everydayers. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. Welcome if you're new to the show. We have a big episode today because free agency begins in the NFL at noon. The Jets and the 31 other teams are all allowed to begin negotiating with guys who are about to hit free agency and who are with other teams. But before that deadline, the Jets struck a big contract agreement with Jamien Sherwood. Sherwood stays in New York on a 3-year deal worth $45 million. $30 million of that is guaranteed. So essentially, it guarantees Sherwood will be with the Jets for 2 seasons. It's a big contract. I mean, this is top 10 linebacker money for Jamien Sherwood. And I have to tell you, you have a pleasantly surprised host on today's episode because I really did not think it was going to work out with Jamien Sherwood. It just felt like there were going to be lots of incentives for him to hit the market, and the Jets are able to strike a deal with him. Now, this is a very expensive contract, and I don't think that this is a slam dunk in either way, whether you want to say it's a good deal or a bad deal. I think there are arguments to be made either way. I don't think you can argue that Sherwood's 4 years in the league, at least what he's accomplished to date, justify a contract that will be $15 million a year, that will make him one of the 10 highest paid linebackers. So I understand from that end if you're a little bit uneasy about this deal. But the way I view it is this. In free agency, you have to take calculated risks. So what are the profiles I'm looking for of a player I'm going to take a calculated risk on? Well, first of all, I want him to be at an age where I feel like he's entering his prime. And that's what Jamien Sherwood is. He's 25. I want to see a clear upward trajectory in his play through his career. Because you know what? Jamien Sherwood's career to date hasn't really justified $15 million a year. But it's not about what he's done so far. It's where he's going. And if he's showing improvement consistently from year to year, that's a real positive thing. And I think it's fair to say with Jamien Sherwood that there has been consistent improvement. His rookie year, he got injured relatively early, missed a lot of time. Year 2, he was kind of a special teamer. He didn't do a whole lot. Year 3, he kind of stepped into a part-time linebacker role. And year 4, he stepped into a starting role and was voted team MVP by his teammates. Now, being team MVP of the 2024 Jets was a relatively low bar, but he played very well in place of CJ Mosley, who was injured for most of the year, and gained the respect of his teammates and kind of became the quarterback of the defense. Now, it was a different defensive system, but Aaron Glenn clearly was impressed enough that he wanted to bring Sherwood back as the leader of his defense, the defense he's installing. Another thing that I like the idea of retaining your own guys. It's always a risk when you're importing a guy from another team because a different situation, different locker room atmosphere. Will a guy from another team fit in your locker room as well as he fit in with his old team? Normally, I'd say, that he fits the system. Sherwood's, it's a new system, but Aaron Glenn seemed to like him enough for the Jets to give him this contract. And we know Aaron Glenn's very much the point person for the Jets' moves right now. This franchise is now built around Aaron Glenn. So I think there are lots of components that make me hopeful about this signing. And another aspect of this, and admittedly, this might not be the greatest argument in the world, but this might just be just me laying out my frustration as a Jets fan. But man, I can't count how many times the Jets have developed a good linebacker here and let him go, and then he goes on to have a great success elsewhere. It happened with James Ferrier, who they drafted in 1997. Had like 3 years where he was very up and down. Then his last year, he kind of developed into a good player, leaves in free agency for Pittsburgh, has a fantastic career with the Steelers. Jonathan Vilma, Jets drafted him in the first round in 2004. He was good with the Jets his first 2 years. Then Eric Mangini comes, and you hear, oh, well, he's not a system fit. And they trade him to New Orleans. He leads the Saints to the Super Bowl. Demario Davis, who, I'll be honest with you, if you listen to the early days of this podcast, I was kind of hard on Demario Davis. He was kind of a late bloomer. It wasn't until his second Jets tenure where he really started to flash. He was here for 1 year. He was here from 2012 to 2015, signed with Cleveland. Jets got him back in a trade in 2017. He has a good year in 2017, goes to the Saints and, becomes an all-pro. I'm tired of this happening. I'm tired of linebackers leaving and being great elsewhere. I want the Jets to actually keep one of their linebackers. And another thing I'll say about Jamien Sherwood, he was excellent last year. If you look at the situation he was in, he finished top 5 in run stops at the linebacker position, and that's not tackles. You can make a tackle 20 yards down the field, and you can pad your stats with tackles don't really help your team. Run stops are plays that, by definition, result in a failure for the offense. They look at statistically of what constitutes a failure in any given down and distance. Sherwood was top 5 in the league last year. And the other thing I'll say is that he played well without being in that great of a situation because, the Jets had Quinn and Williams at defensive tackle, but the other defensive tackles were just really bad. Javon Kinlaw could not play the run at all. Javon Kinlaw should not have been put on the field on any sort of rundown because he could not hold up. Lecky Fatu was disappointing. Solomon Thomas, he had 1 or 2 good games like he does every year. So Sherwood was able to navigate. Now, maybe that helped him pad his tackle stats. Maybe that helped him pad his run stop stats because the defensive tackles weren't there to pick it up. But, it's a sign that he succeeded in a situation where a lot of guys did not. I spent a lot of last year talking about the big name Jets who were underperforming. And to be honest with you, I gave a lot of them a pass because of how dysfunctional the franchise was, from top to bottom. But even in the situation where Jamien Sherwood was on an awful team, in a hopeless situation, a team that was as disappointing as any NFL team in recent memory, he went out there and had the best year of his career. And he looks like a guy who's consistently getting better. Is he a top 10 linebacker right now? No, he's not. Is there a guarantee he's going to be a top 10 linebacker? No. Is there a guarantee he will justify this contract? No. Again, it's not a slam dunk in either direction. But there are lots of things to like about this. And I like the prioritize. This is something Darren Muji talked about in his introductory press conference. He talked about it being a priority that we keep our own guys who are good. And every GM says this, but not every GM follows on it. If you look at the Jets through the years, there have been lots of guys who have been solid players for this franchise who have been allowed to leave. And I think especially the last 2 years, the Jets have not really appreciated their own players. They've really focused on big names. They haven't really dotted the I's and crossed the T's, and really invested in the meat and potatoes type players you need to win in this league. They've been focused on the flashy move, the big name. They've been focused on winning the offseason. The guy who really comes to mind is John Franklin Myers. You still can't explain to me why JFM was traded for what he was traded for. Why did the Jets send him out of here last year? But he wasn't a flashy guy. He wasn't a star. He wasn't a big name. But he's the kind of guy who helps you win. Jamien Sherwood obviously plays a different position, but he's the type of guy who's, going to help the Jets win games if he plays like he did in 2024. Now, I would assume this is probably the end of CJ Mosley's Jets career because now with Sherwood making $15 million a year, Mosley becomes a backup. And the Jets did not sign Sherwood to a $15 million a year contract to make him a backup. The Jets signed Jamien Sherwood to a $15 million a year contract to make him a starter. So Quincy Williams is obviously going to keep his starting job, which means Mosley is looking at being, a very expensive backup, which I don't think is going to happen. So the Jets may end up cutting Mosley because I just don't see Mosley being around, and that would come with a $16 million dead money hit. Now he's got a $12.7 million cap number, so you're talking about $3.6 million hit against the cap because he already has a pretty big cap number. But I think this brings the CJ Mosley era to an end. And I think that's the right move. I think the Jets should move on from Mosley. Sometimes Mosley is a good player. Now, I don't want to get into the contract because I don't think the contract was a very good contract for the Jets. I don't think they got their money's worth. But Mosley's a good player. He's a good locker room guy. But you could tell last year he was breaking down. And I think to ask him to go out there and play at a high level at 33 years of age, based on what we saw last year, that was not realistic. This is the Jets turning the page to the future. This is the Jets embracing a player who's in his prime. And again, it's not a lock. It's not a slam dunk, but I'm inclined to be more positive about this than I am negative. I think that if you're asking me what I would do, I think I would do this. I think I would do this deal. I like the idea of keeping around a core young player. Now, you're on the Locked On Jets podcast. We'll talk about a guy who's not that young, but a guy who plays a critical position. That's Morgan Moses, and we could be getting down to the wire on him. Jets are trying to keep him, but he may hit the market. What are the Jets going to do at right tackle? We'll discuss continuing here on this Monday edition of the Locked On Jets podcast. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any real money back, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert. This is a message from our sponsor, Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was waiting and wondering and worrying if you were going to get any money back, and then waiting and wondering and worrying some more. Now, Taxes is matching with a TurboTax expert who can do your taxes as soon as today. An expert who gives your taxes their undivided attention as they work on your return, while you get real-time updates on their progress so you can focus on your day. An expert who will find you every deduction possible and file every form, every investment, and everything with 100% accuracy. Also, you can get the most money back guaranteed. No waiting, no wondering, no worries. Now, this is Taxes. Get an expert now on TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live full service. Real-time updates only in iOS mobile app. See guarantee details at TurboTax.com/guarantees. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jets your first listener, first watch every day, and a big shout out to you every day. This is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets with new episodes each day through the week, Monday through Friday. The legal tampering period begins in the NFL today, and essentially that means it's the start of free agency, where the Jets and the other 31 teams can begin negotiating with free agents who were signed with other teams. The reason it's called the legal tampering period is that player contracts don't technically expire until the new league year begins on Wednesday. So these players are still technically under contract for 2 more days, and you're not really allowed to negotiate with players who are under contract. That's tampering, but the league has allowed teams to do it 2 days before the official start of free agency. Why did they do this? Well, you used to have to wait until the official start of free agency. You used to have to wait till the new league year began. The league found, though, that teams were not abiding by that. So instead of actually enforcing the rules, the NFL decided to make this illegal tampering legal. And as you can imagine, the NFL set up an incentive structure where they showed that they're not going to punish teams for tampering by talking with players early. So you can bet that teams have already started negotiating with players before the official start of the legal tampering period. And you're going to see deals that will be announced like minutes after noon, because it's noon Eastern today that the legal tampering period begins. And magically, some players and some teams will announce that they've reached a contract a few minutes after the legal tampering period opens. And so you could kind of guess what's going on there. Jets have a number of free agents. A lot of them they're going to have no interest in bringing back. Jamien Sherwood was one of the free agents the Jets were interested in bringing back, and they signed him to a 3-year contract. Another player the Jets have interest in bringing back is Morgan Moses. Mike Garofalo of NFL Network reports that Moses has been medically cleared to continue his career. You may remember he was banged up near the end of the season for the Jets. And Diana Rossini, everyone's favorite reporter with The Athletic, has reported that the Jets are working to re-sign Morgan Moses, but the Jets could have some competition, because if Moses reaches the legal tampering period, if he's still a free agent when he's allowed to begin to negotiate with other teams, the Commanders are interested, the Chiefs are interested, the Bengals are interested, and the Patriots are interested. It's actually pretty good incentive for Morgan Moses to try and wait for free agency, because he could have like 5 teams bidding for him. I have to say, this is one I got wrong. We're going to have to go back and delete the audio of podcasts where I broke it down the Morgan Moses situation over the last month or two, because I got this one completely wrong. I really did not think there'd be that robust of a market for him, because he is 34 years of age. He is coming off an injury. He's coming off 2 seasons where he's been playing through something. His play, while still good, is heading in a downward direction. We talked about Jamien Sherwood, whose play is good and it's been consistently improving. Morgan Moses is still playing at a good level, but it's not quite as good as it used to be. And when you get into your 30s and you start on a downward trajectory, a lot of times that downward trajectory continues. But I guess what I did not count on was the lack of quality offensive linemen across the NFL. It's a supply and demand business, and there really is not much of a supply of quality offensive linemen. So Morgan Moses, a guy who does come with some question marks, is going to have a market. I sat here a week or two ago and said I thought he'd be available after the NFL draft. So again, we're going to go back. Don't go back. You don't have to go back and listen to that. We'll go delete the audio of me saying that. We'll pretend it never happened. But one of the challenges is, as much as I have been a skeptic of the Jets bringing back Morgan Moses, I can't really find many players out there who I think would be a definitive upgrade, because Morgan Moses is a solid guy. I talked in the last segment about meat and potato type players, guys who just do their job without flash. On a good offensive line, you don't have 5 All-Pros. You have to have a couple of guys out there who just do their job very solidly, who don't miss a lot of snaps. Kind of like, it's a cliche, but lunch pail type players. And that's what Morgan Moses has been. And the Jets had Morgan Moses in 2021. He was originally supposed to be the third tackle that year behind Mekhi Becton and George Fant. And the first game that season, Becton suffered what became a season-ending injury. And Moses took over and was rock solid. And the Jets let him leave that offseason. And this is a second guess because I did not criticize the Jets like I should have in hindsight. It's a hindsight thing. But the next couple of years, the Jets were really banged up along the offensive line. They had a lot of injuries, especially at the tackle position. And I came to realize that they made a big mistake letting Morgan Moses leave in free agency after 2021 because Moses, above all else, was a guy who really did not miss much time. He was a guy you could depend on. He was durable. And the Jets lacked durability on their offensive line. Jets lacked a lot of things on their offensive line in 2022, 2023, but they lacked durability as much as anything. And I loved it when the Jets traded for Moses a year ago to get him back from Baltimore. But he is in his mid-30s now, and this is the danger. He in 2023 he missed time for the first time since his rookie season. 2024 he missed time, and look, Moses is a tough guy. He played through injuries. He played through injuries at a point where the Jets were out of the race. You remember what that 2024 season was like for the Jets. It was just a couple months ago. It feels like 5 years ago in some ways, but it was just a couple months ago the Jets finished their season. And there were games late in December where the Jets were out of the race. It was a miserable season, and nobody was happy. It was a really tough spot. And Moses was injured. He was playing through stuff. And you got to respect the professionalism of a guy like that. And that says a lot about Morgan Moses, the type of guy he is, the type of player he is, the type of professional he is. So the question comes down to this. Can you squeeze one more good season out of Morgan Moses? And I'm a skeptic because while he was playing through stuff this year, he missed some time. He did miss. There were a couple games that he missed. And that's a sign, the stuff you can play through at 33 might keep you out at 34 years of age because the body just doesn't respond. We saw this with Aaron Rodgers this year, that the body just doesn't recover the way it used to from the pounding of an NFL season. So I think that there's a lot of risk to bringing back Morgan Moses if you do. And it sounds like it's going to take quite a bit of money because there are going to be other bidders out there. So if Moses takes this to noon, there are going to be a lot of teams interested in the service. And the more bidders you have, the more the price goes up. And that goes back to in the NFL, there just aren't a lot of quality. There just aren't enough quality offensive linemen to go around. So a tough spot for the Jets. And I guess what I come back to is I've gone back and forth on this. I just don't see a lot of clearly superior options to running it back with Morgan Moses. I mean, I guess the hope in an ideal world would be the Jets would be able to draft somebody early this year and maybe groom them to take over. But look, the Jets have a lot of other areas where they need help. So there's no guarantee a tackle will be available. So to be continued on Morgan Moses, we'll see what happens. I mean, by the time you listen, the thing about doing podcast episodes this time of year is that they can have a very short shelf life. So by the time you listen to this, the Morgan Moses situation may be resolved. And that's why, by the way, please follow us on YouTube because as news breaks during the day, I'll put up a short YouTube video for an immediate take, and then we'll break it down on tomorrow. We'll break it down in full on tomorrow's episode. And again, if you're new to the show, this is a daily podcast covering the New York Jets, and we have new episodes each day, Monday through Friday. And here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we're going to turn our attention to the most important position on the field. Monday could be the decision day at quarterback, and there's one player the Jets are apparently interested in, and they may have some fallback options. Let's break down the Jets quarterback position as we continue here on this Monday edition of Locked On Jets. Today's episode of Locked On Jets is brought to you by FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets. You got to love March Madness. It's my favorite time of year. And again, FanDuel is the place to get in on the action because, again, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. You may have your eye on a few underdogs this year. FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something to bet on. And the FanDuel app is easy to use. When you win, you get paid instantly, no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com and get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. Again, it's FanDuel.com. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Monday. Free agency set to begin in the NFL. The legal tampering period gets underway, which essentially means, it's the start of free agency. The only thing about the legal tampering period is that you're not allowed to officially sign a player. So in theory, it gives a guy a couple days to change his mind because he can't sign the contract until Wednesday, and I guess nothing's really official till the contract is signed. And of course, you may remember the Anthony Barr situation 6 years ago when the Jets agreed to terms with Minnesota linebacker Anthony Barr during the legal tampering period. And then he changed his mind before he signed the contract and ended up returning to Minnesota. I mean, those situations do happen occasionally, but they're rare. Most of the time when somebody agrees to a contract, he's going to sign the contract is done. He's agreed to terms with this new team. All eyes are on the quarterback position right now for the New York Jets. Aaron Rodgers, we know, is not coming back. And it seems like the leader in the clubhouse, according to multiple reports, is Justin Fields from the Pittsburgh Steelers. But it sounds like the Steelers are interested in bringing Fields back. And Pittsburgh made a big deal on Sunday, trading for DK Metcalf, a guy I advocated for the Jets being interested in. But realistically, I did not think it would happen because I didn't think that was the direction the Jets were going to go in. And I think it sounds like Metcalf wanted to go to a winning team. And we hope the Jets will become a winning team, but it's difficult to describe the Jets as a winning team right now. So, it could be between the Jets and the Steelers for Fields. And, Fields could end up, it depends. We'll see what direction Fields goes in. I've expressed that I think Fields is probably the best upside option for the Jets. And you look across the league and more what you're seeing, and it's becoming more frequent, is guys who were highly touted first-round picks and maybe fail in their first stop or two, find the right team, maybe 5, 6, 7 years into their careers. And they've learned how to read defenses. They've learned more about passing concepts. It doesn't come quickly to everybody. Not everybody's a Joe Burrow or a Justin Herbert or CJ Stroud where they step on the field and they're ready to play in the NFL. Lots of guys just need time. And Fields might be one of those options. And in addition to all that, I mean, he brings an interesting skill set because of his abilities as a runner. He opens up things in the playbook that a lot of quarterbacks don't. He's a running threat, and I think you put him next to Breece Hall, you start working in some read option there. That's the type of thing that could really make the Jets a dynamic run team. And the hope would be that with a solid pass blocking group with Garrett Wilson, and maybe you hopefully add another good receiver or two, you put him into a favorable situation, and hopefully offensive coordinator Tanner Engstrand is as good as we're hoping he'll be. Hopefully Engstrand is as good as advertised. The Jets apparently have fallback plans if they don't get Fields. Connor Hughes of SNY reports that Marcus Mariota and Carson Wentz could be the Jets' plan B. And if those are the plan B, I'm really hoping plan A pans out because I have no idea why the Jets would be interested in either of those two guys. I mean, I'm hoping that's just like that somebody's just trying to deceive them out there because there are better options than Marcus Mariota and Carson Wentz. I mean, Marcus Mariota is essentially a career backup. He was drafted. Both these guys were drafted number 2 overall. Mariota really never developed into much of a quarterback. He did have like one playoff win. He did lead a big comeback in Kansas City in the playoffs in 2017, but he's not much of a player. I mean, he's fine if he's your backup quarterback, but I wouldn't bring him in to start. The same with Carson Wentz. Carson Wentz had a big second season in the league in 2017, but has just kind of fallen off. And I guess he's fine as a back. I mean, these are guys who are fine as backups, but we got to get someone in here who actually has a potential to play well. Rich Cimini of ESPN mentioned Kirk Cousins, and look, I know that's not a very exciting option, in part because Cousins is so old that he would not have much staying power in New York. And I know there's still a lot of bad blood from the 2018 offseason because 7 years ago, Cousins was a free agent. And I think he had some sort of documentary crew around him. And it became clear the Jets and the Vikings were the two teams that were interested in his services. It became clear he had no interest in the Jets for anything other than using them as a leverage tool to force Minnesota to up their price. He used the Jets for leverage. He had no interest in signing with the Jets, but he's only going to cost $1.2 million because Atlanta's paying his salary. I mean, the thing with Cousins is like there's at least a chance he could bounce back to his Minnesota form. And look, I don't think he's a very exciting option. I don't think Fields is that exciting of an option, but you have to go with somebody who could plausibly be good. Because if we're going into the season with Tyrod Taylor, Marcus Mariota duel, I mean, there's no upside there. We're going into the season with a Tyrod Taylor, Carson Wentz duel to be the starting quarterback. There's no upside there. I mean, Jets got to get quarterbacks with upside in here. I mean, I prefer Daniel Jones to those guys. And I'm not a big Daniel Jones guy, but Daniel Jones is at least a guy who's had some degree of success. Daniel Jones has had some good games. Again, a first-round pick who's a failure. There will not be surprises with him in the New York media market because he's been here most of his career, all except the last couple of games of 2024. Maybe he wants to avoid that, but this could be an opportunity to start. It's an opportunity to prove the Giants wrong. I mean, I'd go with Daniel Jones before I'd go with Wentz or Mariota. Those are shockingly bad options. I really hope the Jets don't go there because as shaky as the Jets' options are, those are. I mean, you got to get somebody who conceivably could play at a starting level. So all this is moot if the Jets are able to land Fields. And despite Pittsburgh being interested, I think the Jets are in the mix for Fields. I think there's an opportunity to get him, and I think that he would be a good upside play. I don't know if Fields may not work out, but there's at least a path to him, being successful here. And we'll see what happens because Monday at noon, the Jets are allowed to begin negotiating with free agents from other teams. But that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. As always, if you enjoyed the show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening so that you'll never miss an episode. If you enjoy the show and are listening on the podcast source, give it a 5-star review. And if you're watching on YouTube and enjoyed the show, give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps us out, helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Enjoy your Monday, everybody. We'll be back tomorrow to talk more Jets.